name, you simply call it by that name. For example, if you want to store a value like pi, or a person's name or surname or ID number, you typically store that into a variable, and then whenever you need to retrieve that value, you'll call that variable. Now, JavaScript allows you to create variables. You can create variables of different types. Two of the most basic types of variables are text and number variables. You create a variable in JavaScript by using the keyword var, V-A-R. Now let's create some variables. To create a variable, again, you type var, and then you put in the name of the variable, the name that you're going to use to reference that variable. Let's call it text1. And then you put a semicolon. Now what this line means is that you've just declared a variable in the computer's memory, and that variable is currently empty. You haven't actually added any value to it. You've called that variable text1. Let's make another one. Text2, semicolon. Now we have two empty variables named text1 and text2 in the computer's memory. Now how do we assign values to these variables? Very simple. Let's say we want to assign a value to text1. We use the equals to sign, and we say text1 is equal to hello everyone. Now again, because this is text, you need to put it in double quotes. Now let's assign a value to text2. Again, text2 is equal to there we go. So now we have declared two variables, text1 and text2. And not only that, but we've assigned values to them also. So whenever you call text1, the computer is going to give you back hello everyone. And whenever you call text2, the computer is going to return I love learning JS. Now how do we test this? How do we test what's exactly stored in these variables? And more importantly, how do we actually use variables? Very simple. What we're going to do is we're going to use the same two lines of text output that we used earlier on, one for the heading and one for the paragraph. Now you remember where we put the output text. In the heading it said this is JavaScript. So what we're going to do now is we're going to delete the entire output text, including the double quotes, and we're just going to leave the brackets. And in place of that, we're going to just put in the name of the variable. So what are we saying here? We're saying document.getElement by ID. That means find the element with the ID heading 1 and set its inner HTML value to text1. In other words, set it to whatever is stored inside text1. Now let's see how this works out. Save it and refresh the browser and see what we get. It changes to hello everyone. Now where's this value coming from? The value is coming from text1. Whatever is the value inside text1, that's the value that will be set for this heading. Let's change it. Let's change it to hello everyone on planet Earth. Save it and refresh. See what happens? Whenever the variable changes, the value changes. The output changes. Now let's do the same thing for the paragraph. We'll add the value text2. Save and refresh the browser. See what you've got? The value of text2. Now you need to remember when you're referencing variables to not put the double quotes, because if you do put the double quotes, then JavaScript will simply not recognize the value as the name of a variable. It will recognize it as ordinary text. Let's see what that means. So let's say I mistakenly put double quotes there. See what JavaScript does now. Save this and refresh in the browser. It changed the value to text1. That means JavaScript put the literal value that's inside the double quotes into the heading output, which is not what we want. So we need to remember that variable names are never included inside double quotes. Okay, now let's have a little bit of fun. Let's create a third variable. We'll call this one text3. And just below text2, we'll assign a value to it. We'll say JS is awesome. All right, really showing a lot of love to JavaScript here. Okay, so what happens next? The next thing we need to do is to output this. Let's output it into the paragraph. Now, how do we do this? Remember in the previous lesson we spoke about text concatenation, joining two text strings together. Well, we're going to use the exact same thing here. We're going to use the plus sign. So we're going to say inner HTML is equal to text2 plus text3. Now let's see what's going to happen here. Save this and refresh the browser. See what you get. I love learning JS. JS is awesome. Now what happened here? You'll notice that there's no space between the first JS and the second JS. There's no space, in other words, between the JS of the first sentence and the JS of the second sentence. We can fix this easily. We can do this by simply adding a space inside the double quotes where we are assigning the value to text3. All right, save this, refresh the browser, and there you have it, all fixed up. We've looked at variables that store text, but what about variables that store numbers? Now let's have a bit of fun. We'll start off by adding a new paragraph. We'll give this paragraph an ID. In keeping with the previous naming structure, we'll call it paragraph 2, and we'll leave it empty. We're going to use that a little later. Now let's declare two number variables. We'll call the first one num_a and the second one, not surprisingly, num_b. Now remember, you can name your variables just about anything you want, but there are certain rules when it comes to naming variables. Now you'll find these rules in the accompanying course to this video on the website. Okay, so moving on, we are going to add some text to that empty paragraph that we added earlier on. And not surprisingly, we're going to use the variables that we just created. Okay, so we're going to start off with document.getElementById. Again, we're looking for paragraph 2. Dot inner HTML is equal to, num_a. There we go. So in other words, the value that's going to be stored inside paragraph 2, or that's going to be displayed in paragraph 2, will be the value of num_a. But there's a problem. Num_a, although we declared it as a variable, doesn't have a value yet. We haven't actually assigned a value value to num A as yet. So let's assign a value. Now earlier on we saw that you can assign a value separately to declaring the variable. So for example, we declared text1 as a variable up there, and then we assigned a value to it down here. But if you want a quicker way to declare a variable and assign it a value, you can do everything in the same line. So let's look at this. You could say var num A is equal to 7 and var num B is equal to 10. Now num A has the value 7 stored in it and num B has a value 10 stored in it. So when you output this line, it should actually output the value 7. Let's see if it works. Save this, head off to the browser, refresh, and there we go, 7. I think by now you're getting the hang of this. Okay, let's try something. What if we try to do some arithmetic with variables? If you recall, previously we added two numbers right there inside these brackets, and JavaScript outputted the sum of those two numbers because we had the plus sign in between. Will that happen with variable names? Let's check it out. Save and refresh. And sure enough, JavaScript added the two numbers together and provided us as output the sum of those two numbers. Awesome. So just because variables are declared as numbers, as integer numbers, they will behave like numbers. Let's change the sign in there. Let's use the minus sign. So we have num A minus num B. So that would be 7 minus 10. Okay, so we're getting into some negative algebra here. There we go. Minus 3. That's your answer. Awesome. In the same way, You can also use the multiplication sign, which in JavaScript, as well as almost every programming language, it's the asterisk, which is Shift A. It's not the X like we have at school, like we use at school. All right, let's save this guy and refresh, and there we got it. 7 times 10 is 70. Awesome. Now, let's try something different. What if we wanted to include text as well as numbers inside the output of a paragraph? Let's try it out. Put a double quote and some text, close double quotes, followed by the plus sign. Remember, the plus in text, it works as a concatenator. It joins text together. Will this actually work? What is our expectation? Our expectation is that it will display the answer is 70. Let's see if it works. Save and refresh. The answer is 70. So it worked exactly as we expected. What JavaScript did was it recognized this section as text, and it recognized these two variables as numbers, and very efficiently it did the arithmetic here, basically multiplied these two together, and then it added the answer to this string. Now let's make it a little more exciting. Let's make JavaScript output this sentence. 7 times 10 is equal to, and the answer. All right, now we're getting a little ambitious here. So num A will display 7 plus, and then we put the times sign, which in normal school arithmetic is the x, and then we put in the value num B plus, are you following, is equal to num A times num B. What's going on here? Let's analyze this line first before we go and see the output. What we're saying to JavaScript is output num A, meaning output the value 7, then output an x, which is the symbol for multiplication. then output num_b, which is 10, then output the equals to sign, which is text again, that's why it's in double quotes, just like the x. These are both text. And after the equals to sign, output the value of num_a times num_b. Now notice I've put in a space before and after the x and before and after the equals to sign. I'm sure you can guess why I did that. It's because if we don't do that, then everything will be just squeezed up together without any proper spaces, and it'll look terrible. All right, let's refresh this. And there's an error. Let's go back and look for that error. Let's look at this line very, very carefully. I've left out something. I've missed out something here. Let's start going through it again. Num_a plus, double quotes, x plus. Whoa, the plus is missing. Added the plus, num_b plus, double quotes, equals to plus num_a times num_b. Should be fine. Let's refresh, and there we go. 7 times 10 is equal to 70. So you're learning quite a bit here. You're seeing how to create, how to declare variables, how to assign values to them, and also how to output those variables.